The bevel tool here is used to simulate sandblast depth, and it can do a pretty good job of it, but there are a few things that you need to realize in how it works in order to make it really work correctly for you. To show how this works, first I'm just going to select everything. You can also do individual selections and do one thing at a time, but just to make things easier, I'll select everything and then I'll run the bevel tool. You can either hit A on the keyboard or just click on the button here. And I'm going to zoom in and show you exactly what it's done here. Now if I zoom into the text, you'll notice that it's applied that bevel so that it now simulates what it would look like to have a depth of carving. However, it hasn't done the panel lines, it has not done the bird, it hasn't done these sections over here or those designs over there. It didn't do the middle design either. And then this white text along the bottom, it did, but it actually doesn't look very good. So, in order to make this work out correctly, I want to talk about why it did what it did and how we can fix that. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll talk about why it didn't do the bird or the panels or the other designs. And that is because before creating this video, I actually took one node right here and I broke that node apart. And because I broke that apart, this design is no longer a closed design. It's an open curve, and you can't apply a bevel effect to an open curve. In order for the bevel effect to actually work, what it does is it takes the frosted section, duplicates that, and then combines with the black area. And so now I've got two things that are open curves. I've got one here, and then I've got one here. So in order to fix this, what I'd have to do is I'd have to go in and close that curve again. I'll just select those two nodes and join them together, and then I'll select the black part and do the same thing, join the two nodes together that are there that I know exist. I know that it was broken there because I broke it myself. If you didn't break your design yourself and there are open curves, you can always use find open shapes here, or you can use join curves in order to figure that out as to where it needs to be fixed. But since I knew where it was broken, I could just do that manually. Now that has happened and that's closed, I can go ahead and select the black part again. And if I move this black part, you'll see that all of the black panel lines and lines have been combined together. So that's why none of those filled in, even though it was only the bird here that was open. Since they've all been combined together, it's considered an open curve because that had been opened right there. But I can go ahead and apply the bevel again to just that outline, and now you'll see that it's applied that bevel correctly. And we'll zoom back down into the panel lines, and you'll see how the panel lines have been corrected right there. Go ahead and zoom out and zoom into our designs over here in the corner. You can see how they've been applied correctly. And then last of all, I will zoom down into the middle section here and show how it's been applied correctly there. So all of those pieces were fixed just by closing in that one node that had been broken apart. So you have to make sure, first and foremost, that your curves or your design are actually closed in order for it to work. Okay, so the next thing, or the next area where we had a problem, was here in the frosted outline text. The reason for that is, like I said before, what it does is it duplicates that inside frosted piece and combines it with the outside piece in order for it to look correctly. If that doesn't happen, you'll notice that it just applies a bevel to the entire black area, which is not what you want. And the reason that it didn't duplicate this is because it's still text, and so because it's text, it tries to apply the bevel just to the text itself instead of combining it. If it were to combine it, it wouldn't be text anymore, it would be a curve. So in order to do that, you'd actually have to do this manually. I'd make a duplicate. I'm just hitting the plus sign on my numeric keypad. That makes an exact duplicate over the top of the original. And then I would shift select the black. So I've got this part here, and I actually have to clear the effect in order for this to work. And we'll have to clear the effect here. So I will take that now, shift select the part behind it, and combine those together. That way it's showing through to the polish behind it. And then this text would actually not have a bevel at all, so I'd clear that effect as well. And then I'd have to reapply the bevel to all of the black areas. But that fixes the problem there where we had our text beveling incorrectly. It wouldn't be beveled at all, or it shouldn't be. And then those lines here are now correct, where it's beveling only the V line instead of the entire black area like it was before. So we fixed both of those sections. The last thing that we would need to fix is down here on the white text. The bevel tool itself has certain parameters when it creates the bevel, and it's meant for black text, and so we can still get it to work on white text. We just have to edit it manually. So we have to go up to Window, Dockers, and Effects, and open up the Bevel Docker, which is already open, so I'll just go to that here. And you can see the settings that it uses for the bevel. But because it's white text, we need to basically do an opposite bevel of what we had before. So the shadow color, we'd need to go to black. The intensity, instead of 0, we'd want it up here. The altitude can actually be more, and the direction itself, I'm just going to apply it this way first so you can see what happens. Altitude is going to change how dark that is. It's not going to cast a whole lot of shadow on skin traced lettering, and so I wouldn't want that altitude to be very high. But you can also see that it doesn't quite look right, and that's because of the direction that the shadow is being cast. So I would switch that to an opposite direction. And now as we zoom in, you'll see that it actually appears to have depth to it. You can change the intensity as well. That's how bright white that's going to be for your light color. And those settings can all be edited manually, but in order for white text or white objects to appear correctly, it would all have to be done manually. Now over here on the other side, it's got the original settings. If we click back on this, it'll have the fixed settings. So what we could do is we can select this, go up to Effects, and clear that effect. It still has the original settings, but we can click back on this one. It'll pull up those settings. And we can click back on this and then apply those. And that way it would apply the same settings that we had for over here. Now that we've got all of that figured out, we can go ahead and apply a granite fill. And I'll just do 2 different ones here so I can show you how it works out. So it looks pretty nice. If I zoom in, you'll see that that looks nice there. However, if I were to choose a different color of granite, we'll go with black. You can actually see here the G and around the edge, but if we didn't have the bevel effect on here, and just zoom back in, if we didn't have the bevel effect, all of a sudden the G disappears, and this line here, you can't really tell the difference between the lithochrome and the black stone itself. So that's one reason why it's really nice to show the effect, is that even on a dark stone or a black stone you can see where those differences are. One thing that you have to realize though is you have to apply the bevel to grayscales first, It does not work if you're applying to granite fills. And then the other thing you have to realize is that because it has to duplicate the frosted areas and combine them with the black areas in order for it to work correctly, we now have duplicated lines. And so when it comes time to cutting, if you were to take this and try to cut it, you'd get double cuts, which is not something that you want to do. The plot page is actually set to clear all of those bevels for you, but there's still the duplicate lines, and so you'd have to go in and manually take all those pieces that were duplicated and delete them. Or the other option is to go ahead and send out your cut file first, create your plot page first before applying any of the bevels, which is a way of doing it as well. That way you don't have to go in and remove all those duplicate pieces. So those are a couple things that you need to realize, is that one, frosted outline text will not work correctly just because it's already text, and so you'd have to manually make a duplicate of it and combine it with the outside line. If you have something that's not closed, it will not bevel at all, because you can't bevel an open curve. White has to have manual settings, and everything gets duplicates, and so you have to make sure that you erase those duplicates before it's time to cut. The last thing to realize with bevels is that the bevel itself is an effect, and it's a bitmap effect. And so because we're working on such large files, we have in effect a 36-inch by 16-inch bevel, which can cause your system to slow down a little bit when it's trying to apply those complex bevels. And so you'll notice that your system will slow down a little bit, especially if you took the bevel and went up to Object and said Break Bevel Group Apart. It takes a while for that to actually work.